My name is Helen Carter. I'm 66 years old and have been retired for just under 2 years. I receive about $2,500 a month in Social Security benefits. In a small town in Delaware, that's enough to get by. So long as I watch every penny, it covers my needs just fine. My husband passed away young. After my son David got married, it's just been me living alone in this old house, keeping it warm with memories. At my age, isn't that what life is supposed to be about? Family gathered around, laughter echoing through the halls. With Christmas around the corner, David called to say he wanted me to spend the holiday with them this year. At that moment, my heart lit up like someone had handed me a steaming cup of hot cocoa in the dead of winter, filling me with a warmth so deep it reached my bones. The minute we hung up, I got to work. I pulled an old suitcase out from the back of the closet, wiping it down again and again until it was clean enough to catch a faint reflection. The new sweater I had set aside for the holidays was already folded neatly, waiting. One by one, I packed it along with a few other things. The smoked bacon rolls David loved as a boy, Olivia's favorite local honey, and some homemade preserves, carefully making sure I forgot nothing. As I packed, my fingers brushed over an old, yellowed photograph. David was just a teenager in that picture, grinning wide with his bright smile and those 2 little front teeth poking out. Beside him stood a younger me, thick black hair, a confident smile, eyes brimming with a fierce, unstoppable hope for life. Decades had slipped by in a blink. All my life I poured everything into this family, into David. When he was little, I worked shifts at the textile mill, graveyard shifts, swing shifts, coming home so bone-tired I could barely stand just to make sure he had a better life. When the mill shut down, I peddled at flea markets, took odd jobs, whatever it took. I fought tooth and nail to put David through college, to set him up with a good start in life. Only when he was settled, married, and steady did I finally feel like I could breathe. Retirement has been plain like a glass of water. Only when I saw David and his family did life taste a little sweeter. I just didn't know that sweet sip was already laced with poison. When I arrived at David's apartment, the elevator doors slid open and Olivia was already standing there waiting. She beamed and rushed over. "Helen, you're finally here. It's freezing outside. Come on in." She took my suitcase with cheerful hands, bustling around. Sit down. I'll get you some hot tea to warm up." David poked his head out of the study, flashing a tired smile. "Hey, Mom." He looked worn down, dark circles under his eyes. "End of years, always crazy." "Been working non-stop," he explained. I nodded, a flicker of worry in my chest. "You've only got one body, honey. Don't run it into the ground." Olivia quickly returned with a steaming cup of tea. The cozy scent filling the living room, the heat from the radiators wrapped around me. It felt worlds away from the chill of my own little house. Olivia whisked my suitcase into the guest room and bustled off to start dinner. The meal she whipped up was rich and impressive. Roasted beef, fragrant and juicy, steamed cod, tender and buttery, a handful of bright, refreshing side dishes. Her cooking had truly gotten better. I couldn't help but praise her, and she laughed, eyes crinkling. "I'm so glad you like it. You should come by more often. I'll cook for you every day." But for all her easy smiles, there was a note of something, just a little too polished, a little too eager. She kept heaping food onto my plate, fussing over me with the kind of care that was almost too flawless, like a brand new jacket that fits wrong in the shoulders, close but not quite right. David, meanwhile, shoveled food into his mouth without much thought, eyes flickering to his phone again and again, as if something was pulling at him. The table felt lively on the surface, but underneath it was like a sliver of bone caught in my throat, impossible to swallow, impossible to spit out. The next morning, Olivia's parents arrived. The moment they walked in, Patricia swept Olivia into a big, showy hug. The two of them chattered away, their high-pitched laughter filling the living room like the rest of us had simply vanished. I stood to the side, invisible. For a moment, I could almost feel myself fading into the wallpaper. Robert was more restrained. He shook my hand, exchanged a few polite words. Patricia, though, had the air of someone used to sitting behind a big desk. Before she retired, she worked in a city government office, and it showed. She gave me a glance, her eyes flicking over my worn wool coat, the one I'd had for years, thick and sturdy, warm, if a little outdated, and her mouth twitched in a way that wasn't quite a smile. To her, I must have looked shabby, out of place. The coat that had always made me feel prepared, proud even, now suddenly felt thin and tired under her gaze. Dinner carried a subtle tension. David and Robert exchanged bits of conversation about the latest financial news while Olivia and her mother chatted animatedly about neighborhood gossip, supermarket discounts, and whose children had recently moved up a grade. I sat there, quietly, picking at my food, feeling like I didn't belong. Patricia's voice, sharp and carrying, soon steered the conversation. Robert and I pull in almost $15,000 a month between our pensions, she said, lifting her teacup with a practiced grace. Her eyes flickered toward me, quick and assessing. Our expenses are minimal, so life's been quite comfortable. Just last month, we bought a little condo down in Miami. It's perfect for the winters, warm weather and clean air. She turned with a smile to Olivia. You two should start planning ahead. Housing prices are only going up. Better trade up to a bigger place now, especially before the babies come. Olivia nodded quickly. We're actually working on that, Mom. Then Patricia turned her gaze back to me, her tone dripping with false concern. And you, Helen, how's your health holding up? I heard from Olivia that your pension isn't all that much. Are you able to cover your day-to-day expenses? Her voice was light, but there was a glint in her eyes, a subtle but cutting judgment. I forced a composed smile, even as something tightened in my chest. I get about $2,500 a month. It's enough for my daily needs. My health is about the same, some old aches, but nothing serious. Oh, $2,500. Patricia stretched out the words, her eyebrows lifting slightly, her voice full of a delicate, almost imperceptible pity. I picked up my teacup, hiding behind it, masking the sting and the pride that flared up inside me. It's only now at this age that I truly understand. In some people's eyes, your entire worth can be summed up by the numbers in your bank account, and mine didn't even qualify me for a polite nod in their world. After dinner, David called Robert into the study to consult about some investment matters, leaving Olivia and Patricia on the living room couch, half watching TV, half whispering to each other. I felt exhausted, not in my body, but deep down where the ache settles and doesn't leave. I excused myself, saying I needed some rest, and retreated to the guest room. It was a small room but neat and bright. A small pot of ivy sat on the nightstand, its leaves lush and green, giving off a quiet, stubborn vitality. Yet inside me, everything felt heavy and stuck. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the dull, gray sky, my mind drifting away. I thought about the winter Olivia wanted those expensive basketball shoes, how I worked a week of overnight shifts in the warehouse just to afford them. I thought about his college years when I sent every hard-earned dollar I could scrape together while living off stale bread and tap water. I thought about his wedding when I emptied my savings and even borrowed from friends to help him put down the deposit for his first home. I've never done anything remarkable in my life. All I ever tried to do was make things a little easier for my son. I always thought that would be enough, but now feels like it was never even close. I stayed in the guest room for a long while before finally getting up, needing some air. I eased the door open and was about to step out when I caught the sound of low voices drifting from the living room. It was Olivia and Patricia speaking in hushed tones, soft but clear as a bell in the stillness of the house. Mom, what can that old woman even do with $2,500 a month? She's still moving around now, but what happens when she gets sick? I'm supposed to drop everything and take care of her. Olivia's voice, tinged with thinly veiled irritation, pierced through me like a hammer blow. My foot froze mid-step, nailed to the floor by an invisible force. Exactly. I warned you about this, Patricia said coolly, her voice sharp and precise. That little pension of hers barely covers her own bills. If she falls ill, she'll be nothing but a burden on you." I held my breath, cold sweat soaking my palms. I tried to retreat quietly, but their words clawed at my ears, refusing to let me go. "Why keep her around?" Olivia muttered, her voice a low, bitter whisper that sliced straight into me. $2,500 a month wouldn't even cover a halfway decent home care nurse. "Which is why," Patricia said, with terrifying calm, "you need to sort out the house while she's still lucid. Get it signed over to you and David before it's too late." "The house?" Olivia sounded hesitant, but there was a greedier note underneath. "That place is old, but the location's good. We could probably sell it for maybe $400,000. "Exactly," Patricia urged, her voice seasoned with cold calculation. "You need it in your hands. Otherwise, if she loses her mind and leaves it to someone else, you'll have no one to blame but yourself." "And besides," Olivia added lightly, "she's been coughing a lot lately. Looks pretty pale, too. Who knows how much longer she'll even hold on?" Those words cut across my heart like a blade, sharp and merciless. I felt the blood in my veins freeze solid. My limbs turned to ice. Even breathing hurt. Pain, rage, and a deep, gut-wrenching sense of betrayal surged through me, drowning me completely. I had always thought Olivia, despite her little pettiness, at least respected me as her mother-in-law. I never realized that in her eyes, I was just a low-value liability, an aging burden to be managed, maybe even discarded when it became too much. All those smiles, those warm welcomes, the carefully prepared meals, it was all an act. And now I'd seen the script before the final scene. I bit down on my lips so hard the taste of blood flooded my mouth. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, but I forced them back. I couldn't fall apart here. I couldn't let them see me break. I slipped back into the guest room, moving like a defeated soldier retreating from the battlefield. My chest felt ripped open, but somewhere deep down, a painful clarity took hold. I couldn't stay here another minute. This house, with its warm tea and cozy rooms, had become a gilded prison. Without hesitation, I yanked open my suitcase and began stuffing my things inside one by one. My movements were cold and mechanical, like I was burying the last scraps of my dignity. The new wool coat I had bought for the holiday, the smoked bacon rolls I had spent days preparing, the jar of homemade jam I had wrapped so carefully. Now they all seemed like cruel jokes mocking my foolish hopes. I fumbled for a pen on the nightstand and with trembling hands scribbled a short note. "Neighbor Helen had an emergency. I went to help her. Don't worry." The handwriting was crooked and messy, a mirror of the chaos raging inside me. I took a deep breath, grabbed my suitcase, and quietly cracked the door open. In the living room, the TV still blared. Olivia and Patricia were deep in conversation, laughing softly, oblivious. Keeping my head down, I crossed to the door, slipped on my shoes, and pulled the front door open without a sound. In less than 30 seconds, I was outside. The wind slapped my face raw and biting, but no amount of winter air could match the cold that had already settled deep inside me. I didn't look back. I gripped the handle of my suitcase and kept walking one step after another into the night. When I made it back to my little house, the sky had already sunk into complete darkness. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I just groped my way to the sofa and collapsed onto it, my body heavy and limp. The suitcase sat abandoned by the door, leaning against the wall like a stray dog no one wanted. The house was eerily silent, broken only by the occasional sweep of headlights cutting across the windows, casting fleeting pale shadows across the room. In the darkness, I could hear the pounding of my own heart. And then finally, the sobs I had been choking down all evening. Tears came in a rush, hot against my cold hands. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly alone, utterly abandoned. The family I thought I could lean on, the bond one had spent my life building, it had all been built on the fragile foundation of money and convenience. In their eyes, I wasn't even worth the trouble, just an old woman with a meager $2,500 pension, a future burden to be offloaded as quickly and cleanly as possible. I don't know how long I cried, long enough for the tears to dry, long enough for my heart to grow cold. I wasn't going to lie down and accept this. I couldn't. For once in my life, I needed to live for myself. I lifted my head slowly, staring out at the endless stretch of night beyond the window. Maybe overhearing their conversation wasn't an accident. Maybe it was the universe giving me one last wake-up call. It was time. Time to reevaluate my life. Time to reclaim my future. I fumbled for the lamp next to the sofa and switched it on. The light wasn't strong, but it pushed back the darkness, illuminating the room. And somewhere deep inside me, a tiny, stubborn light sparked back to life. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Jason. His name flashed on the screen, familiar and heavy. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Mom, why did you leave so suddenly?" Jason's voice was laced with worry and confusion. "Olivia said you left a note, something about neighbor Helen having an emergency." I cleared my throat, steadying my voice. "Yeah, Helen's husband had a sudden heart attack. She panicked and called me for help." It was a lie, and it sat like a stone in my chest, heavy and suffocating. "Oh, is everything okay now?" Jason asked. "Yes, everything's fine now." They got him to the hospital. I continued spinning the lie, a sour taste creeping up the back of my throat. Good, Mom. Please take care of yourself, okay? If anything comes up, you have to tell us." He paused, then added, "I'll try to come by and visit in a few days." "No need," I said quickly, my voice light but firm. "You just focus on your work. I'm fine over here." After we hung up, I exhaled a long breath. But somehow, the air felt even heavier. Not long after, Olivia called. "Charlotte, why'd you leave without saying a word? We were so worried about you," she said, her voice dripping with concern. Perfectly measured, perfectly sweet. But I could hear it, that tiny thread of relief in her tone, like someone who had just shrugged off an unwelcome burden. "There was an emergency at home," I said calmly. "It's been handled now." She kept up the sweet act, but I knew better. Funny how when they no longer have any hold over you, they come around pretending to care. A few days later, Jason finally came to see me. He sat stiffly on the sofa, fidgeting with his hands, looking like he was carrying something heavy he didn't know how to set down. "Mom, that day," he began, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Did you hear anything?" My heart tightened slightly, but my face remained calm, unmoved. "Hear what?" "No," I said, my tone light and even. Jason stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to read something hidden deep inside my eyes. I met his gaze steadily, outwardly serene, even as my heart bled silently inside my chest. Though I couldn't tell him, not now. If I exposed everything, it would only make things harder for him, and for me, there was no point. He finally dropped his gaze, and after a long pause mumbled, "Mom, sometimes Olivia says things she doesn't really mean. Please don't take it to heart. In the end, he still chose her." I nodded slightly, saying nothing more. The room fell into an awkward silence, broken only by the steady ticking of the old clock on the wall. Jason stayed for a little while longer, fussing about my health, reminding me to take my medicine before he stood and left. I watched from the window as he hurried down the steps and disappeared down the street. A small, lonely figure, swallowed by the gray afternoon. There was sadness in me, disappointment too, but above all, a familiar, weary acceptance. The son I had poured my life into would never truly understand me. After Jason left, the house returned to its usual empty quiet. I sat alone on the sofa, listening to the second hand of the clock tick by. Each click a dull, echoing reminder of how hollow my days had become. I started to think seriously for the first time. What should life after retirement really look like? Grocery runs, kitchen chores, the occasional chess game, or idle chat with old friends in the park. It was all so flat, so lukewarm, like a cup of water left out too long, neither hot nor cold, flavorless and forgettable. That night at Jason's house, the words I overheard had struck like a muffled thunderclap, tearing through the fog of my complacency. I couldn't live like this anymore. I stood up and began to sort through the old house I had lived in for most of my life. I opened dust-caked cabinets, pulling out piles of forgotten odds and ends. Piece by piece, I sorted through them, throwing the useless into trash bags, carefully setting aside the ones that still meant something. Buried deep in an old wooden chest, I found relics from another life, yellow photo albums. One showed me in work clothes smiling brightly on the factory floor. Another showed me and my late husband on our wedding day, him in a crisp suit, me in a simple white dress, shyly leaning into his side. And just like that, the memories flooded back. In my younger days, I had truly loved photography. Even when money was tight, I scrimped and saved for months to buy my first camera, a second-hand Canon one. Wherever I went, that camera came with me. I even joined the city's photography association, learning tricks of the trade from the seasoned photographers there. Some of my photos had even made it into the factory's internal newsletters. But life got busier. Bills needed paying. Jason needed raising. And little by little, photography slipped away. The camera was shoved into a corner somewhere, forgotten under a layer of dust. Thinking back now, those days of chasing light through a viewfinder were some of the purest, truest moments of my life. Hard, yes, but so real, so full. I set the old membership card down carefully, feeling a surge of something I hadn't felt in years, a flicker of excitement. Why couldn't I pick it up again? I still had time. I still had strength. I refused to let the rest of my life slip away silently, unnoticed. I ransacked the closet and after some digging, finally unearthed my old Canon camera. I wiped it down with trembling hands, polishing the dust from the body. It was old, a relic, but still intact, still beautiful. In that moment, I made a decision. I would enroll in a photography course at the local community college. I would start over properly this time. My greatest enemy wasn't illness. It wasn't loneliness. It was surrender. And I was done surrendering. The next day, dressed in a clean, neatly pressed sweater, I stepped into the admissions office at the local community college. The admissions officer was warm and patient, helping me enroll in an introductory photography class. Seeing the words Photography 101 printed at the top of the registration form made my heart race with a mix of nerves and excitement, just like the first time I ever collected a paycheck. Clutching my brand new student ID, I walked out of the building into a sun-drenched afternoon. The light wrapped around my shoulders like a blessing. In that moment, I could almost see the woman I used to be at 20, camera in hand, eyes wide open to the whole world. Life at the community college turned out to be even richer than I had imagined. Most of my classmates were retirees like me, rediscovering parts of themselves they had left behind. Everyone was full of laughter, easy conversation, and stories that spilled out faster than we could keep up with. Our instructor, Mr. Peterson, was a retired news photographer with a sharp wit and endless tales. Every lesson was packed with humor and wisdom, and even his smallest anecdotes had us roaring with laughter. I threw myself into learning, and before long, I had found a group of kindred spirits. There was Martha, a former architect whose shots of building structures were breathtaking. Tom, a retired philosophy professor who had a passion for capturing street life and candid human moments. And Linda, an exuberant soul whose photos were always bursting with flowers and blue skies. We hit it off immediately and formed our own little photography group, giving it a playful name, the Golden Lens Club. Every weekend, we ventured out together for photo walks. My old Canon was clunky compared to everyone's modern gear, but the black and white images it produced had a depth and soul that no new technology could replicate. Later, at Mr. Peterson's encouragement, I saved up a few months' worth of my pension and bought a beginner's digital SLR. I began learning post-processing techniques, diving into the world of light adjustments, cropping, and color grading. Suddenly, my days were filled with purpose and joy, studying lighting, framing shots, adjusting camera settings, tweaking the vibrancy of a photo. It felt like I had traveled back to a time when I was strong, alive, and full of energy. Not long after, the community center announced a photography exhibition titled Living Our Best Lives. Our Golden Lens Club submitted a few pieces for it. To my amazement, one of my photos, Sunset on Main Street, won second place. The shot captured a quiet small-town street bathed in golden twilight with an old man sitting peacefully on his porch, a pipe resting between his teeth, utterly at ease with the world. That old man was Walter, Helen's husband, sitting right outside their house on Main Street. After the exhibit, the local newspaper even did a feature on me, complete with a picture and a headline that read, "Retired Worker Rediscovers Her Passion Through the Lens." Holding that newspaper in my hands, seeing my name and my photo in print, a deep, indescribable pride welled up inside me. It turned out there are countless ways to live out your later years. Just like in photography, change your perspective and the whole landscape transforms. I was no longer someone's burden, someone's afterthought. I was the main character in my own life. Somehow Jason got his hands on that newspaper article and showed up at my house not long after. He had the paper clutched in his hand, his face lit up with a mixture of surprise and what almost looked like disbelief and pride. "Mom, you're amazing," he said, his voice full of admiration. "You really kept this hidden, winning an award and everything." He laughed, half joking, but the genuine admiration in his eyes was impossible to miss. "Oh, it's nothing," I said, pretending to be modest, though inside my heart was doing cartwheels. Jason studied me carefully for a moment. "I swear you look different," he said. "You seem brighter. You've got this energy about you." For the first time, I could feel it. The truth was, it was about more than just the photography. I was finally living for myself. I had reclaimed a part of me that I had lost over the years, and in doing so, I had rediscovered a strength and a joy that I didn't even know I had. The greatest gift of all was realizing that it wasn't too late, that at any age, we can always choose to grow, to change, and to live our best lives. After Jason left, I felt a quiet peace settle in my heart. It was as though, after all these years, I had finally come home to myself. And yet, I knew the journey wasn't finished. There were still many miles ahead, full of moments to be captured and dreams to pursue. A few weeks later, Amanda called. Her voice was syrupy sweet, laden with a kind of urgency that made my skin crawl. "Charlotte, I heard you've been doing really well with your photography business. Things are looking up for you, huh?" I could feel the undercurrent of something she wasn't saying. "Yes," I replied casually. "It's been good. I'm working on a few new projects, and it's been very fulfilling." "That's great, but you know," she paused just a bit too long. "I was thinking, if you have some extra cash, maybe you could help us out a bit." I could hear the slight tremor in her voice, but she quickly recovered, pushing through. "You've got your photography business now, right? It's doing well. We're just a little tight on some expenses." I knew exactly where this conversation was going. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice light. "I appreciate the thought, Amanda, but right now, my funds are tied up in my photography studio and some upcoming projects. I really can't help at the moment." She let out a small, forced laugh, trying to brush it off, but I could tell I had caught her off guard. "Well, of course, Charlotte. Just thought I'd ask, but don't worry about it. We're managing." After I hung up, I couldn't help but smile. It was as if the roles had reversed. They had always seen me as someone they could rely on, someone to sacrifice and give. But now, I was standing tall on my own terms. I had my own life, my own purpose, and I was no longer just a part of someone else's plan. The following week, Emily and I took a weekend trip to the coast. We spent hours walking along the beach, snapping photos of the waves crashing on the shore and capturing the soft light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the sand. The simple beauty of the moment made me feel alive, truly alive, for the first time in years. The weight that had been on my shoulders for so long had begun to lift. One afternoon, while we sat by a cafe with coffee in hand, Emily looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "Charlotte," she began, "I've been meaning to ask you, What made you finally decide to go after your dreams? I know it wasn't easy for you." I smiled, setting my coffee cup down slowly. "It was a long time coming, but I think I just got tired of waiting for permission, for approval. I spent so many years trying to make everyone else happy, trying to prove my worth by what I gave. But now, I'm finally giving to myself." Emily nodded, her eyes bright with understanding. "It's incredible, you know. You're living proof that it's never too late to live the life you've always wanted." The truth of it all was that I had learned to love myself, to honor my own needs and dreams. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living for someone else's expectations. I was living for me. That night, back at home, I found a message from Jason waiting on my phone. "Hey Mom," it read, "I've been thinking. I'm proud of you, really proud. I see how hard you've worked your whole life, and now you're finally doing something for yourself. I just wanted you to know that." A soft smile spread across my face as I read his words. For the first time in a long while, it felt like Jason was truly seeing me. Not as a mother who had sacrificed for him, but as a woman who had a life and a purpose of her own. And that was enough. From that moment on, I knew that no matter what came next, I was going to be okay. Life had a way of surprising you when you least expected it, and now I was ready for whatever adventure lay ahead. Whether it was capturing another sunset on a quiet street or traveling across the world for a new project, I would continue to chase the light. I would continue to live, fully, fiercely, and unapologetically. Over the next few months, my life began to shift in ways I hadn't imagined. My photography studio started gaining traction, and the small online store I had opened for selling prints was starting to flourish. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the recognition, the validation that I was worthy of pursuing something bigger than my retirement and the confines of my small town. I continued to travel with Emily, and our photography adventures took us to new heights, both creatively and emotionally. The world was full of stories waiting to be captured, and I was finally living the life I'd always dreamed of. Every new location, every new person I met brought a sense of fulfillment that made every sacrifice, every struggle, feel worth it. During one of our trips to the mountains, as we sat on a quiet hilltop watching the sun set over the peaks, Emily turned to me. "You've come a long way, Charlotte. You're not the woman I met last year anymore. You're different now." I chuckled softly, thinking back to that woman who had been hesitant, unsure of herself, unsure of her place in the world. "I suppose I am, but I think it was always in me. I just needed the right moment to find it." Emily smiled, her eyes twinkling in the fading light. "Well, you found it, and you found yourself along the way too." As we packed up our gear and prepared to leave the mountain, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the success I had found, but for the people I had met along the way, and for the one truth I had finally accepted, that my worth wasn't tied to what others expected from me. It was about who I chose to be, how I chose to live, and the love I chose to give myself. Back at home, the days began to blur together as I dove deeper into my photography work. The recognition continued to pour in with more exhibitions and invitations to showcase my work. It felt surreal, as though I had been given a second chance at life, one that was vibrant and full of possibility. Jason came to visit one weekend. He seemed different, more grounded, and perhaps even more appreciative of the life I had built for myself. "Mom," he said one evening as we sat together on the porch, "I think I finally understand what you've been trying to tell me all along. You're not just my mom. You're you. And I see that now." Those words, simple as they were, hit me with a profound impact. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen by Jason, not just as a mother, but as an individual with her own desires, dreams, and ambitions. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how far I had come, from a woman who had spent years sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of others, to someone who was finally living fully, unapologetically, and on her own terms. The phone rang the next day. It was Amanda. "Charlotte," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "I've been hearing a lot about your photography lately. You've really made something of yourself." "I have," I replied, my voice steady, "and I'm proud of it." "Well," she continued, "I wanted to apologize for everything. I didn't see it before, but now I get it. You've always been more than just the woman who gave everything for her family. You've been a person in your own right." I was quiet for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. "It's never too late to see someone for who they truly are," I said softly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Amanda spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Charlotte. I've been blind. I'm sorry for everything." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if forgiveness was something I even needed from her, but I did know one thing. I had finally learned to forgive myself, and that was enough. A year later, my photography studio was thriving. I had built a name for myself, not just in my community, but across the country. And as I prepared for my next big project, an exhibition that would take me to Paris, Emily called me. "Ready for your next adventure?" I laughed, the sound bubbling up from deep within me. "Always. Let's chase the light, Emily." And so, the journey continued. Every day, every moment became a new chapter, a chapter where I wasn't just surviving, but living, fully, bravely, and unapologetically. The months that followed were a whirlwind of exhibitions, photo shoots, and new friendships. In Paris, I had my first international gallery showing. The thrill of seeing my photographs displayed in a city known for its art was indescribable. It wasn't just about the art itself, but the fact that I had made it. At my age, I had found my voice again, louder and clearer than ever before. During my time in Paris, I met Lucas, a fellow photographer with a passion for capturing raw, candid moments. We spent hours walking the streets, snapping photos of the city's people and architecture. His perspective on life mirrored mine in many ways, and we quickly became good friends. Our conversations, deep and insightful, filled the spaces between photographs. One evening, while sipping coffee in a small Parisian cafe, Lucas turned to me. "You know, Charlotte," he said thoughtfully, "there's something special about the way you see the world. You don't just capture images, you capture emotions, the essence of life." I smiled, feeling a quiet pride wash over me. "It's taken a lifetime to get here," I replied, "and it's been worth every moment." Lucas smiled back, his eyes shining with understanding. "I think you've just begun. The best of you is yet to come." That night, as I stood on the balcony of my apartment overlooking the glittering lights of the Eiffel Tower, I realized how far I had come, from the woman who had once felt invisible to this, a photographer, an adventurer, and most importantly, someone who had reclaimed her own story. Emily had been right all along. It wasn't about the accolades or the recognition. It was about finding joy in the journey, in the process of living fully, and I was doing just that. Back home, my life continued to evolve in ways I never expected. The photography studio was growing, and I was receiving more offers than I could keep up with. My work had been featured in national publications, and I had started teaching workshops for other senior photographers who, like me, were reinventing themselves after retirement. One afternoon, as I was preparing for another exhibition, Jason called. "Mom, I just wanted to check in. How's everything going with the studio? And the photography?" His voice was warm, filled with concern. "Everything's great, Jason," I replied. "In fact, it's better than ever. I've never felt more alive. I'm so proud of you, Mom. I really am." There was a moment of silence between us, and for the first time, I felt like my son truly saw me, not as a mother, not as a caretaker, but as an individual who had her own dreams, her own path. "Thank you, Jason," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That means more to me than you know." The next few months passed in a blur of exhibitions, press interviews, and creative collaborations. But the true joy I found was in the small moments, the quiet mornings spent sipping coffee, the the laughter shared with Emily as we traveled the world, and the realization that I was living life on my terms. No longer tethered to the expectations of others, I was free. One day, I received an unexpected phone call from Patricia, Amanda's mother. Her voice was softer than I remembered, tinged with a humility I hadn't heard before. "Charlotte," she began, "I wanted to apologize for everything. I didn't understand then, but I do now. I see what you've created, and I'm so sorry for how I treated you." I was quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. "Thank you, Patricia. It's never too late to understand," I replied gently. As I listened to her apologize, I realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't just about giving others peace. It was about giving myself peace too, and with that, I let go of the last bit of resentment that had lingered from the past. The years that followed were filled with more success, more joy, and a deep sense of fulfillment that only came from living authentically. Jason continued to visit, and while our relationship wasn't perfect, it was genuine. I no longer needed his approval to feel whole. I had learned to validate myself, to be my own source of strength and pride. As I sat on the porch one evening, looking at the setting sun, I reflected on how far I had come. Life after 60 had turned out to be more vibrant, more exciting, and more full of possibilities than I ever could have imagined. And as I looked toward the future, I knew one thing for sure. The journey was far from over. There were still so many places to explore, so many stories to capture, and so much more life to live. I smiled to myself, knowing that the best was yet to come. As the days passed, I found myself increasingly at peace with the choices I had made. The photography studio continued to thrive, and the projects grew more exciting with each passing day. My work took me to new places, far beyond the confines of my small town, and yet it was those quiet moments at home when I would sift through my camera roll or organize my prints that brought me the most joy. I started to explore more personal projects, using my photography as a way to document the lives of ordinary people. I wanted to capture the stories that often went unnoticed, the quiet resilience of those who lived simple lives but carried with them a lifetime of wisdom. There was beauty in those moments, in their quiet smiles, their stories told through wrinkled hands, their experiences painted in the lines of their faces. Emily had become not just a friend, but a constant companion in this adventure. We traveled together, capturing the essence of the places we visited, always supporting each other in our shared passion. There was something comforting about knowing that, in a world that had sometimes felt isolating, I had found someone who truly understood me, someone who shared my passion for living fully, no matter the age. Our travels took us to Iceland, where we spent days photographing the stunning beauty of glaciers and waterfalls. The northern lights danced above us in the cold, a breathtaking spectacle of color and light. In the freezing night, as we set up our cameras on icy terrain, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. I had spent so many years living for others, and now I was finally living for myself. "Charlotte," Emily said one night as we sat by a warm fire, our cameras resting at our feet, "I've never met anyone like you. You're a force of nature." I chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the fire. "It's funny, Emily," I said, looking out at the swirling lights in the sky. "I used to think life was about survival, about just getting through, but now I realize it's about living, truly living." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the light from the fire. "You've taught me that," she said, her voice sincere. "You've shown me that it's never too late to make our dreams come true." For the first time in my life, I truly believed it. My dreams were no longer on the back burner. I was out there, chasing them with every step I took. And with Emily, with the new friends I had made, and the studio that was growing with each passing day, I knew I had finally found my place in the world. I returned home from Iceland with a sense of purpose I had never known. The sky above me seemed bigger, the world felt wider, and every moment held more significance. One afternoon, as I was walking through the local park, camera in hand, I met a woman who was sitting on a bench gazing out at the trees. Her face was lined with age, but there was a spark in her eyes that reminded me so much of myself when I was younger. I approached her, my camera raised instinctively. "Would you mind if I took your picture?" I asked. She smiled, her face lighting up. "I'd love that," she said, sitting a little straighter. As I took her photo, I realized that, in this moment, I wasn't just taking a picture. I was capturing her story, the history that resided in her smile, the years of laughter, sorrow, and everything in between. It was in that moment that I realized this is why I picked up the camera, to capture life in all its forms, to document the people who make the world so rich with experience. The woman thanked me as I lowered the camera, and we shared a few quiet moments. "You've got a good eye," she said softly. "Don't ever stop." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "I won't," I replied. I left the park that day with a renewed sense of purpose. The world was full of stories waiting to be told, and I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of. Through the lens of my camera, I saw the world as it truly was, beautiful, complex, and full of possibility. The past had its place, but it no longer defined me. It was the present, the future, and the moments yet to come that mattered most. And I, Charlotte Hayes, was finally embracing it all. As I moved forward, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. The years I had spent believing that I was simply an afterthought in my own life, waiting for the next chapter to start, seemed like a distant memory. Now, I was living a story I had never imagined for myself, a story full of adventure, discovery, and independence. The photography studio continued to thrive. My small team of fellow retirees and creative spirits was a constant source of joy. We had found a rhythm, each of us contributing our unique talents to create something beautiful. Whether it was a local gallery showing or a commission from a boutique magazine, I could feel the pride radiating from each of us. We were no longer the overlooked, the forgotten. We were artists. One afternoon, I sat down to review a new series I had been working on. It was a tribute to the elderly, capturing the beauty and dignity in their faces, the stories hidden in their eyes. As I sifted through the images, I realized just how much I had learned. These portraits weren't just of old people. They were of lives well lived, lives full of moments that were often overlooked by the world. I felt honored to give them a voice. A message popped up on my phone from Emily. "How about a trip to Venice next month? You, me, and the cameras. Let's capture the canals at dawn." My heart lifted at the thought. Venice, with its serene beauty and rich history, was the perfect place to continue our photographic journey. I quickly typed back, "Absolutely. Let's make it happen." As the weeks passed, the excitement built. Emily and I began planning the details of our trip, exchanging ideas for shots, discussing potential locations, and dreaming about what we would capture. We were no longer just two women traveling the world. We were collaborators, friends, and kindred spirits who shared a deep love for photography and life. The trip to Venice was magical. The city, with its winding canals and centuries-old buildings, provided the perfect backdrop for our photos. We spent mornings on gondolas, capturing the soft morning light reflecting off the water, and afternoons wandering the narrow streets, finding moments of everyday life hidden in the hustle and bustle. We both captured photos that spoke to our hearts, photos that told stories of the people we met and the places we had seen. It was in Venice that I truly felt the weight of how much my life had changed. Here I was, at an age when many would consider themselves settled or finished, creating work that was being appreciated and celebrated. My photographs were not just art. They were a testament to the fact that it was never too late to live a meaningful life. As we wandered through the city, Emily turned to me. "Charlotte," she said, her voice filled with a quiet awe, "I've never met anyone like you. You're proof that life doesn't end when we hit a certain age. It can begin again if we're brave enough." Her words hit me like a wave, and I realized just how true they were. I had spent so many years thinking that my best moments had already passed, but here I was, living my best chapter yet, and I didn't plan on stopping anytime soon. That evening, as we stood on a bridge overlooking the Grand Canal, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant colors, I knew that the world was still full of possibilities. It had taken me years to get here, but every moment, every challenge, every triumph had been worth it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I raised my camera to capture the last light of the day. This moment, like so many others, was a reminder that I wasn't finished. I was just getting started, and the adventure, my adventure, was far from over. I smiled as the shutter clicked, knowing that the next chapter, the next photograph, and the next journey would be just as breathtaking as the ones that had come before. My life, at 66, was finally unfolding the way I had always dreamed it would, and with each click of the shutter, I was creating a story that was uniquely mine, one of independence, rediscovery, and the quiet joy of living fully every single day. As the days passed and our time in Venice grew shorter, Emily and I found ourselves growing closer. We spent our evenings exchanging stories, laughing about our adventures, and dreaming about the next destination. What started as a shared love of photography had blossomed into something deeper, a friendship rooted in mutual respect and shared experiences. It was rare, this kind of connection, and it felt good, so good, to have someone who truly saw me for who I was, someone who didn't look at me as a woman of a certain age, but as an artist, a creator, a person. It was in those quiet moments, sitting in a small cafe or wandering along the cobbled streets, that I realized how much I had missed the feeling of being seen, of being appreciated, not just for what I could give, but for who I had become. I hadn't realized how much I had craved it until I found it again. Emily, with her vibrant energy and fearless spirit, had reignited something in me. And as we captured the light and colors of Venice together, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for all the experiences that had brought me here. The heartbreak, the loneliness, the betrayals. It all led to this moment. I had learned to stop living in the shadows of my past and instead embrace the woman I had become. Our time in Venice came to an end, but the bond we had formed didn't fade with the sunset. It only grew stronger. We returned to our lives, but we stayed in touch, sharing photographs, ideas, and plans for future trips. The photography studio continued to thrive, and I found myself pouring more and more of my energy into it. I was no longer just a retiree passing the days. I was living, truly living, in every sense of the word. One day, as I sat in the studio, reviewing some of the new prints we had received from our latest shoot, I got an unexpected call. It was Jason. His voice was hesitant, unsure. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about everything you said." My heart skipped a beat. I had thought that bridge had burned for good, but maybe, just maybe, there was hope. "I know it's been a while," he continued, "but I wanted to apologize for everything, for not being there when you needed me." I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of emotions stir within me. Jason was never one to express himself easily, but hearing those words from him after everything was a step I hadn't expected. "It's okay, Jason," I said softly. "I've made peace with a lot of things, but you're here now, and that means more to me than you know." There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice breaking the silence. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how we should live our own lives, and I get it now. I've been stuck in my own way of thinking for so long, I didn't even see it." Tears welled up in my eyes as I listened to him, the son I had raised, the son I had fought for all my life, finally recognizing what I had tried to show him for so many years. "You don't have to apologize," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We all have our own journeys, Jason, but now, maybe, we can walk our separate paths and still find a way to respect and love each other." The conversation didn't end with any grand resolution, but it didn't need to. It was a start, a small one, but a start nonetheless. Jason had finally started to see the person I had become, not just the person I had been. And in that quiet exchange, I knew that things were changing between us, slowly but surely. As I sat in the studio later that evening, reflecting on everything, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I was no longer the woman I had once been, the one who clung to the hope of family and validation. I had found my own worth, and it wasn't tied to anyone else's expectations. My photography, my friendships, my independence, all of it was a testament to the life I had built for myself. And in that moment, I realized something profound. It was never about the destination. It was about the journey, and my journey was far from over. The next morning, I packed my camera bag and set off on another adventure. This time, it was to the southwest, to capture the desert's wild, untamed beauty. As I drove through the sunlit roads, the vast landscape unfolding before me, I felt a thrill I hadn't known in years. The world was still full of possibilities, and I was ready to chase them all. As I ventured further into the desert, I couldn't help but marvel at the way the light transformed everything around me. The reds and oranges of the earth, the golden hues of the sun stretching across the sky, all came together in a breathtaking display of nature's raw power. I was reminded once again of why I had fallen in love with photography all those years ago, the way light could reveal the beauty in everything, even in the most unexpected places. The desert was quiet, almost eerie in its silence, but it was a silence that spoke to me. It reminded me of the quiet moments I had spent alone in my old house, reflecting on my life, my choices, and the path that had brought me here. It was as though the landscape itself was telling me that, no matter how many years had passed, it was never too late to start anew. I spent the next few days in awe of the desert, photographing the shifting dunes, the sharp contrast between the shadows and the light, and the deep, ancient beauty of the landscape. Each image I captured felt like a piece of my soul, each one a small testament to the life I was reclaiming for myself. Emily checked in with me daily, sending me messages of encouragement. "I can't wait to see the photos," she'd text. "I know you're capturing something incredible out there." Her belief in me, her unwavering support, had become a lifeline, a reminder that true connections, the kind that transcend expectations and judgment, were worth holding on to. It was during a quiet evening in the desert, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a soft shade of lavender, that I realized something profound. For so long, I had let my identity be defined by others, by the roles I played as a mother, a wife, a daughter, even a grandmother. But now, for the first time in years, I was defining myself. The woman in the photograph, the one with the thick black hair, the confident smile, the unstoppable hope, she hadn't vanished. She had only been hidden beneath the weight of other people's expectations. And now, as I stood there in the fading light, my camera in hand, I could see her again. She was back, and she was stronger than ever. I returned home after my desert adventure, my heart full of new experiences and my camera full of images that told the story of a woman who had chosen to live for herself. When I walked into the studio, the familiar warmth of it embraced me. The space I had created for my photography, for my art, had become a sanctuary, a place where I was free to create without judgment, without expectation. The photos I had captured during my time in the desert found their place on the walls of the studio, each one a reminder of how far I had come. The world outside had changed, and so had I, but I had finally learned to embrace the changes. And for the first time in my life, I was proud of the person I had become. As I stood there, taking in the images on the walls, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The life I had once dreamed of, one of freedom, purpose, and self-expression, was no longer a distant hope. It was my reality, and it was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. A few months later, I received an invitation to showcase my work at a national photography exhibition. The recognition, while unexpected, felt like a validation of everything I had worked for, everything I had fought to reclaim. When I stood in front of my photographs, Surrounded by strangers who admired and appreciated my work, I felt something I had never felt before. Pride, not for the awards or the recognition, but for the journey itself. I thought back to the woman who had once felt invisible, who had hidden behind the roles she played, who had allowed others to dictate her worth. She was gone, replaced by a woman who had finally learned to see herself. And in that moment, I realized that the greatest gift life had given me wasn't the success, the accolades, or the accomplishments. It was the freedom to live fully, unapologetically, and without fear. And as the years went on, I continued to chase the light, to capture the moments that made life beautiful, to create art that spoke of resilience, of strength, of starting over. My journey was far from over. I still had many stories to tell, many adventures to experience. But for the first time in a long while, I knew one thing for certain. I was exactly where I was meant to be. As time passed, my photography grew into more than just a hobby. It became a way to connect with the world around me, to explore places I had never dared venture before. I traveled to the mountains of Colorado, the bustling streets of New York City, and the quiet beauty of small towns in the Midwest, capturing the essence of life wherever I went. But no matter where I traveled, no matter how far my camera lens took me, I always returned to the place that had started it all, the quiet little house in Delaware. The house that had once felt like a prison now seemed like a sanctuary, a place where I could be myself, where I could reflect on my journey, and where I could keep creating. My relationship with Jason had healed. Though it had evolved into something new, he no longer sought my approval or looked to me for financial help. Instead, he came to me for advice, for support, for guidance. And though we had our differences, I knew that the bond between us had shifted, become more authentic, more balanced. Amanda, however, was a different story. After the dinner with the recording, she stayed away. At first, I felt a deep sense of relief, but as time passed, I couldn't help but feel a sorrow for the woman who had once been part of my family. It wasn't just the money she had wanted, it was control, a way to secure her place in my life, and when that failed, she disappeared. But I wasn't angry anymore. I had learned to let go, to stop seeking validation from those who only saw me as a means to an end. I had my own path now, one that was clear and full of potential, and that was enough. It was enough to know that I had reclaimed my life, that I had chosen my own happiness. As the years went by, I found myself more at peace than I had ever been. My photography continued to thrive, and my little studio became a beacon for others who, like me, had been searching for something more. The Golden Lens Club, my group of fellow retirees, continued to meet and share their work, each of us pushing ourselves to explore new horizons. One afternoon, as I sat in the studio, editing a recent batch of photos, I received a call from Emily. She had some news. She had found an old cabin up in the Pacific Northwest, a small secluded place by the ocean, perfect for a photography retreat. I'm thinking of turning it into a place where photographers like us can come and recharge, share ideas, and get inspired. What do you think? She asked. I smiled, excitement bubbling in my chest. This was it. Another new adventure, another chance to push boundaries and create something lasting. I said yes without hesitation, and just like that, I was preparing for the next chapter. The retreat in the Pacific Northwest became more than just a place to escape. It became a sanctuary for those who, like me, had spent years building lives for others, only to discover that it was never too late to start living for themselves. As I walked along the rugged cliffs overlooking the ocean, camera in hand, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was where I was meant to be, and as the sun set behind the ocean, casting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I took one last photo, knowing that the journey I had started so many years ago, when I picked up my first camera, when I began to see myself, was still unfolding. The light, always changing, always beautiful, would continue to guide me forward, and with each new chapter, I would capture it, frame it, and share it with the world. The story of Charlotte Hayes was far from over. There were still many sunsets to photograph, many stories to tell, and many horizons to chase. But one thing was certain: I would live them all with the same fierce, unstoppable hope that had carried me through all the years of my life, and this time I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to do so. The months that followed brought a sense of renewal that I hadn't expected. The photography retreat in the Pacific Northwest became an oasis, not just for me, but for others too. Word spread among my fellow photographers, and soon the retreat was booked out for months in advance. Each visitor brought their own stories, their own struggles, and through our shared experiences, we built something much more than a retreat. It became a community. There, among the wild beauty of the cliffs and the ocean, I found myself teaching others what I had learned over the years, not just about photography, but about life. I talked about resilience, about taking risks, about never giving up, and most importantly, I talked about the power of starting over, no matter how old you are or what the world tells you about your worth. The world had taught me many lessons, but the greatest lesson was this: the true essence of living lies not in the pursuit of perfection, but in the courage to embrace imperfection. It was okay to stumble. It was okay to fall. What mattered was getting up again, camera in hand, ready to capture the next moment no matter what. Emily and I continued to be inseparable, traveling together, supporting each other, and encouraging one another to push the boundaries of our creativity. We had our photography, yes, but we had something far more valuable: a friendship rooted in respect, understanding, and the quiet joy of simply being seen for who we truly were. The retreat grew into something I had never imagined, evolving into a hub for creativity and inspiration. Young photographers, retirees, and everyone in between came to our corner of the world, eager to learn, share, and find their own path. And for the first time in my life, I saw that the seeds I had planted long ago, through the sacrifice, the tears, the quiet hours in front of the camera, had borne fruit. My relationship with Jason continued to evolve too. He visited the retreat a few times, and though there were still moments of tension, there was also understanding. We no longer talked about money or expectations. Instead, we talked about life, about dreams, and about the future. There was an unspoken acknowledgement between us now, something deeper than the superficial ties that had once bound us. And then, one day, I received a letter. It was from a well-known photography magazine that had caught wind of the work we were doing at the retreat. They were interested in featuring the stories of our community and the journey we had all taken to reclaim our passions and redefine our lives. I couldn't help but smile as I read the letter. This was it. Our story was finally being told, not just through my lens, but through the stories of so many others who had found their voices. I sat down that evening, looking at the sunset as it painted the sky in hues of gold and pink. The moment felt so surreal. I thought back to the days when I had been sitting alone in my little house, feeling invisible, wondering if it was too late to start over. Now, I was living proof that it was never too late. Life had a way of surprising you, and if you were open to it, you could find beauty even in the most unexpected places. As the retreat continued to thrive, I found myself busier than ever, but also more content. I had found a rhythm in this new chapter of my life, one that was filled with purpose and passion. There were still challenges, of course. Life always had its ups and downs, but I knew that no matter what, I would continue to move forward, camera in hand, heart open to whatever came next. The photography studio flourished as well. I had begun working with local businesses and artists, documenting their stories and helping them capture their work in a way that made them feel seen. My photos, which once told the story of my own life, now told the stories of others, and I couldn't have been prouder of the work we were doing. And through it all, I continued to live by one simple truth. Life, like photography, is all about perspective. What you choose to focus on, what you choose to frame, shapes your entire experience. I had learned to focus on the things that mattered, the moments of beauty, the connections with others, and the quiet strength that comes from living authentically. My name is Charlotte Hayes, and my story is far from over. I've spent my life capturing moments with my camera, but now I'm capturing something far more important, my own freedom. The lens I use to look at the world is no longer clouded by regret or fear, but by the light of possibility, and I'm ready to keep chasing that light wherever it may lead me.